So hello, my name is Denny May. I'm a due process consultant here at KVEC. I want to welcome you today to our new emerging teacher cadre. Today's topic is going to be on IP goal writing. And as we work toward developing IPs that make a difference for our students in our region, this is one small piece, but it is a very important piece of the whole puzzle when it comes to developing IPs. And without further ado, we're going to get going. All right, without getting too far into it, today's topic is goal writing, and we're talking specifically about annual goal writing and some short-term objective writing in terms of what's going to go into an IP and what are the nuts and bolts of that development of those goals. And so, where do we begin in this journey? Where do we go if we're sitting in our cubicle, or if we're sitting at our desk at school, if we're sitting at home and we're thinking, you know what, we'd like to really know some more things, and we'd like to have further reading on a topic. The Kentucky Department of Education, in conjunction with OSEAL, which is the Office of Special Education and Early Learning, provides for you the guidance document around IEP, but it's very accessible for you, and it has it's about 100 pages in length, give or take a page or two, but it is really the definitive guidance that we have and in the state of Kentucky as far as how to write present levels, how to handle writing goals, which we're going to talk about today, how to handle special factors and supplementary aids and services and specially designed instruction. So don't hesitate to reach out and get you a copy of that. Keep that right at your fingertips as you're writing your IEPs. And certainly it is a document that's well done. It has great examples in it. And so we're going to share some of that today as we move through it. What do we hope to accomplish today? What are our goals for today? We're hoping to have a conversation, but we also want to focus on our learning targets. And our learning targets today is to really write effective annual IEP goals and to explore the ABCDEF method for goal writing, which is what is in the IEP guidance document that we just referred to. So we have a system. We have a system in place. It's documented in the IEP guidance document. You can read about that on your own, but we're going to just kind of dive in and look at some just particulars around this particular subject. So the first thing we want to do is we want to ask you this question. I want you to consider this question. Why does writing good IEP goals matter? Writing good IEP goals are detrimental to keeping the student moving towards the learning target to satisfy each particular need of each student, and that's perfectly fine. Yes, that's good. We want to meet the student's needs, and we have to think about what it is that the student needs to be working on. So in addition to core instruction, in addition to differentiation, in addition to tiered activities within MTSS or RTI. Good IEP goals allow for our students to grow academically, behaviorally, and socially, along with determine what may be the next step for them in their journey. So one of the things that we always talk about when we're talking about writing goals when we're considering students and we're considering the deficits and the needs that they have, one of the things that we always point our students to, or our teachers to, or whomever we're talking with about this, is the Andrew F. case. And the Andrew F. case is really, it talks about the substance of the IEP. It talks about, can we prove that the student is making progress? So out of the Andrew case, there was a couple of things that we learned. One, we are to meet students where they are. Yes, we're bound by the Kentucky academic standards, and we need to provide access to the Kentucky academic standards for whatever student is on whatever particular grade level. But instructionally, we need to look to where they are actually functioning. So, for example, you may have a student that's in sixth grade that may be reading on the third grade level, and that's their instructional level. So we need to meet them where they are. We need to provide them with ambitious goals. So we would look at about the fourth grade level and trying to raise them up to that level in about a year. And so on the screen here, you see the Andrew F. We have measurable goals. We've got to make sure those goals that are written are measurable, that we've got tools embedded in there that will measure the verbs that we place in there. And so those behaviors and those skills that we're talking about, they need to be able to be measured in order to meet the demands of what Andrew taught us. And Andrew also taught us that progress monitoring, if we're not doing progress monitoring, we can get in tons of trouble. So in order to do that, we have to write goals that have the proper behaviors, the proper skills, the proper wording, and the proper tools that will measure. And we're going to talk about that in depth a little bit here in the next little bit. So that's really what we're talking about. One of the things that we see lots of times as we're running around the region and we're looking at your files is we'll see goals that maybe are they fall a little short when it comes to the depth that's needed for an entire year of work. So when we write these goals, we need to think about that. We need to think about how are we planning for this goal to be broad enough that we're going to work on a year with this student. We're going to work for a year on this particular skill. And so, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through as well. So one of the things that we want to talk about today is the content discussion here. We want to really think about the ABCDEF method. Okay, so it's in the IEP guidance document. It's clearly linked in there. And sometimes it's confusing for new students. Sometimes you've been to a school, maybe you've been to a university that has taught you to write SMART goals. And SMART goals are fine. There's nothing wrong with SMART goals, but the way we write goals in Kentucky, we follow this ABCDEF method. And really the only thing that's a little bit different about the SMART goal is that they put in a time, and we just are going to go ahead and assume that our time frame is a year, and we're going to work on that goal for a year. Now, there are some things that can come up that can keep us from working on that same goal for a year. Certainly if goals are not working, we let our progress monitoring tell us, and we need to tweak those goals, or we need to tweak those instructional strategies that we're using. But just for the sake of understanding and taking a look at the ABCDEF method in terms of writing goals. So the A part is the student's name. It's simply the student. It's who the goal is for, right? Who we're writing it for. And then the B part is the behavior. That's going to be that measurable skill that we're going to take a look at, that we can see, that we can count, we can hear it, we can time it. Some goals, some verbs are not measurable. In the back of the IEP guidance document, there's a list, there's an appendices back there, and there's an appendix, and I can't remember exactly which one it is, but it lists a ton of measurable goals. And so when we think about behavior, we need to be able to see it, count it, hear it, and time it. It's actually what the student's going to do. And the example here is they're going to read. Can we hear them read? Yes, we can hear them read. Can we measure whether or not they're reading words correctly? Yes, we can measure that. Can we measure how many words they can read in a minute? Yes, we can do that. So we can see it, we can count it, we can hear it, we can time it. And so that meets all the marks there. And so you need to ask yourself that question every time you put a verb in a goal. Can I see it? Can I count it? Can I hear it? Can I time it? And then the circumstance. This is under what condition will the behavior occur? And this phrase, when given a reading passage, and we may put some other things with a graphic organizer, or when given a reading passage with on the student's instructional level. Those are the circumstances. So the definition of the circumstance is under what conditions will the behavior occur? How are we going to set that up? Is it going to be in a small group? Is it going to be in circle time? Is it going to be on the rug in front of us? Is it going to be, are we going to provide them with some tools that are going to scaffold them? Those are the types of questions that we're looking at with that. And as we move on through, we have the degree criterion. Now, the degree criterion in the state of Kentucky example is with 90% accuracy, but then we also have things to add to that. With 90% accuracy in 4 out of 5 consecutive trials, or 4 out of 5 trials, or 3 out of 4 trials. So the degree is going to be, to how well we're going to do the particular skill. And so there needs to be a link between that percentage. You notice there's a percentage there. So you got to have numbers around those skills, and you got to be able to think about in your present level, does this goal and that percentage link back to a percentage that you've listed as a baseline in your present level? And certainly we're not going to talk about present level. We talked about present level last time, but this is the internal consistency that we talk about with the IEP, where we're always looking to see, does that percentage in that goal link back to a percentage around that same skill, and is it listed as a baseline in the present level? And then you have your evaluation method of measurement. How will progress be measured? And so this is a little tricky too. And so we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into that. And we want to make sure that we are matching appropriately the method that will in fact measure the behavior that we're saying we're going to be measuring. And then that frequency of data collection is going to be, how often are we going to take data? Are we going to take it twice weekly? Are we going to take it once a week? We need to be pretty clear as to when we're going to take data, and we need to match that with our progress monitoring. And so our progress monitoring needs to be clear in terms of, are we going to write that goal and collect data from that goal? Are we going to probe that student, weekly? Are we going to probe them twice weekly? 3 times a week? Those types of things. So, and I can just say about data collection, the more data you take, the more trend data you're going to have, and the more it's going to speak to whether or not the student's making progress. But that's also a tricky thing too, because sometimes it's not appropriate to take data daily, like if you're doing reading instruction. So there's some things to talk about with that as well. So just quickly, just that ABCDEF method, we're just highlighted here, and it's just the way we are taught and the way we are guided by the state to write these goals in the appropriate method. But you can have all of the proper pieces in a goal developed on the IEP, in a goal that's developed on the IEP, and it still not be measurable. So the keys are making sure that you get the proper verb, the proper behavior, back on that previous slide, that is measurable, and then that you use the tool that will measure it with. So that's very vital in terms of making that goal measurable. And it's the only way you can progress monitor. Going back to the entry slide, that's the only time you can do that. So here's an example, and to kind of laid it out with, you can insert anyone's name in here, but sometimes we start with the circumstance piece. So we would say, with the graphic organizer, John will write a 5-sentence paragraph with 80% accuracy on 4 out of 5 trials as measured by writing samples. But we would probably place probes in there, and I've got equal to curriculum-based measures. And we're going to look at some screenshots here in just a second around that. But, getting that proper embedding of the tool within that goal is one of the big mistakes that we see lots of times as we're looking at your work. And we're looking at teachers writing goals correctly. That evaluation method of measurement sometimes can get confusing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit deeper. And of course, it's going to be collected. We're going to collect that data twice weekly. Now, that might be a little bit much for a 5-sentence paragraph to do that 2 times a week. But certainly, if you're embedding that in your instruction and you're taking data, you should be able to take data And when you do a curriculum-based measure, you want it to be a quick snapshot. You want it to be something that is you want it to be something that is quickly taken. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't need to last for a long time. So even if if you thought about this a little deeper and you said, well, maybe that maybe needs to be a direct measure, and we're going to write a 5 sentence paragraph, maybe we should use a rubric rather than a probe. So when you put these goals together, sometimes there's always a different way to look at it, and certainly curriculum-based measures are not always the way. You might say, I'm going to write a 5 sentence paragraph under a time constraint. And so that might be a curriculum-based probe. But if you might turn that into a different type of assessment where you would look at a direct measure where that student's sitting right in front of you and you're watching them write that 5 sentence paragraph. And then you're going to use a rubric to maybe say, okay, you're going to assign points for each of the sentences, and you're going to turn that into a percentage. And so, it certainly, there's lots of ways to do it, but certainly we would want to think about always making sure that we have all the proper pieces with A, B, C, D, E, F. Now, if we're looking at this in Infinite Campus, this is a screenshot taken from the data standards that KDE puts out. These are really helpful as well. The data standards kind of guide you through, with some screenshots from Infinite Campus as to what it looks like. But what we're talking about here is selecting the proper method of measurement. Now, your annual goal is going to appear up here above that, but this is like a drop-down box. So when you drop down, you're going to have these choices. You're going to have a curriculum-based measure, a direct measure, an indirect measure, an authentic measure. Now, what we want to do is when we select direct measure, we want to make sure that in fact is a direct measure. And so, or if it's curriculum-based, is it in fact curriculum-based? And so with that previous goal that I showed you, that could come into question here. I did this kind of on purpose here in terms of this may not be exactly the best measurement to choose here. Probe, and as we get into and we see the definition, we'll see what we're talking about. But writing a 5 sentence paragraph may not be exactly the best measurement, may not be a curriculum-based measure. It may be a direct measure. And so certainly I wanted to point that out, is matching the method of measurement to the embedded tool that you're going to use is super, super important. Now, if we look over here, we see a goal, an IEP reading goal, given a list of benchmark terms during small group instruction. So we're going to give the student a list of words. They're going to read the word passages with 90% accuracy at a rate of 85 words per minute. Now, I want you to look at that goal. If you can find that there might be a mistake in here. So this is a little practice session for you right here. Now we see that we have chosen curriculum-based measure and probe, and we've got that highlighted and choosing that. So we're going to take that off but look at the rest of the goal. Is there something problematic about that goal? And so just take a look at that and see what you think. You see anything wrong with it? Obviously, we didn't name the student here, but the student would be which part of the A through F model? So I'll go ahead and put the answer in for the first one. Audience, an A, yes. And so if we were going to look at read word passages, which one would that be? Would it be B, C, D, E, F? We're looking at will read word passages. So it's the B part, right? How about the circumstance? Can you find the circumstance? Can you tell me what the circumstance is? We're going to go away from putting the letter in, and let's have you put the phrase in. which is the circumstance. Given a list of benchmark terms during small group instruction. That's exactly correct. And so that's the C part. Now we're moving on. We've got the A part, the student. We've got the B part. They're going to read passages. They're going to do it while they've been given a benchmark list of terms during small group instruction. And then they're going to read, and they're going to, the degree criterion, 90% accuracy. That's correct. Now, do we see anything wrong here as we get to this degree criteria? Do we see the goal? Do we see problems with this goal? Did we leave out part of the degree criterion? Yeah, 4 out of 5 times, exactly. And so, and then at a rate of 85 words per minute, where does that fall? How are we going to know that's 90%? I guess is a better question. We're going to have to know how many words the kids should be reading, right, in order to determine if they're getting 90% accuracy on 85 words per minute. So this is a little confusing. So you can see how the goal can get messed up. And I did that on purpose because sometimes non-examples are one of the best ways to teach. And so we would want to think about also, so what are we measuring? What is it we're trying to measure? We're trying to measure what? So here it is. How many words a student can read in a minute from a list of words? How many words can they read in a minute? So we got some work to do with this. Now, how would you fix this goal to make it correct? I need you to fix this goal so that it makes perfect sense, that we know what we're measuring, that we have the A, B, C, D, E, F complete. Now, obviously, the E part is going to be the curriculum-based assessment or the probe, and then weekly is going to be the F part. So we've got all that covered. So now, how would you rewrite that goal? How would you rewrite that goal? Are we measuring? Here's my question. Are we measuring the reading of word passages? Are we measuring the reading of words? So we might say something like, given a list of high frequency words on the students, say the students on the, let's say they're working on the 5th grade instructional level. John will read 90% of the words in 4 of 5 trials. So I might say 4 of 5 weekly trials as measured. Yeah. So when presented with reading word passages, the student will read 90% accuracy, given a list of reading words on the 5th grade level at a rate of 85 words per minute. Given a list of high frequency words on the 5th grade instructional level, John will read 90% of the words in 4 of 5 weekly trials as measured by probes. So that might be a better way of writing that instead of getting so confused in terms of what are we measuring? Are we measuring reading word passages, or are we measuring just reading words from a list? So that was a little bit confusing, and so I wanted to use that as a teaching tool there to kind of bring you on beyond that. Now, you've got that high frequency words. You're going to increase fluency. Okay. What if you just consider the guidance from the IEP document, the IEP development document, and you're thinking about increasing the word reading, what are some prerequisite skills that you might turn into short-term objectives based on what this guidance is here on the left? Develop a couple of short-term, just maybe one short-term objective that might support. I want you to think about word reading. I want you to think about increasing accuracy and fluency. And what are some of the things that you might work on with this student? Because what I see lots of times out there when I'm reviewing files is I'll see the student's going to read this many words at 70%, and they're going to read this many words the next time at 80%, and that's going to be the short terms. And so we kind of start a gradual increase in the level of mastery or competence, but that might not be the problem. We want this goal to be big enough for a year, and so if we're going to increase reading comprehension, maybe that be the thing. And we're going to break that down. So I want you just to think about that for a second, and I want you to use the guidance here and discrete skills within the whole, subcomponents of the whole. What are some of the prerequisites for increasing, let's say reading fluency or reading comprehension? What could be some short-term objectives you could develop around this? All right, so we're going to jump right on into it. So if I'm thinking about, let's just throw up comprehension there. If I'm thinking about just increasing comprehension, this goal that I provided you with in the chat, the previous goal, it might be more like a short-term objective, honestly. You may want to think about comprehension as being the target, and then this goal that we've talked about with increasing fluency is going to impact comprehension. So it could be a subcomponent of the whole. And so when we look at that, here's what I'm going to suggest. If you're looking at decoding skills, given a group of multisyllabic words, the students will correctly decode multisyllabic words with a regular spelling pattern with 80% accuracy in 4 out of 5 trials as measured by weekly curriculum-based measures. And then if you might be looking at, does that decoding piece help increase fluency and comprehension? Yes, but we're working on comprehension right now, okay? So that subcomponent, that prerequisite skill may be where we need to back up to in that short term. That's what short-term objectives are. It's a small amount of time. We're going to work on this particular skill, but we're going to seek to impact the overall. And so the other ones that we might work on are sight word recognition. Given a list of words from a 4th grade word list, the student will correctly identify and read 90% of the high frequency sight words as measured by weekly CBM assessments. And then of course, there's the one for fluency. Given a 3rd grade level passage with appropriate intonation and phrasing, the student will read at a rate of 70 words per minute with 90% accuracy in 4 out of 5 trials. And then of course, there's the comprehension goal. So any of these goals, any of these short-term objectives can impact the overall of the comprehension goal. The goal needs to be broad enough that it's going to be enough that you're going to work on it for a whole year. So the idea here is that we don't want to work on just a short, we want to work on all those skills, but when you're working on reading, reading comprehension might be the more appropriate annual goal. And your sight word recognition, your decoding skills, your work on fluency, your work on vocabulary may in fact do that. And going back to subcomponents of the whole, discrete skills within the whole, gradual increase in the level of mastery or competence, gradual increase in the complexity of the circumstance. So you really need to think about getting away from just stair-stepping those percentages and thinking about what are the discrete skills, what are the smaller skills that are going to impact the overall goal. It's going to be your broad yearly goal. And so that's certainly something to think about. Now, I listed some SDI, some visual supports, explicit instruction in phonics, phonemic awareness drills, embedded vocabulary practice, and the use of visuals for retelling. Those are all specially designed instruction strategies that we can use to support some of these short-term objectives and some of these goals that we're working on. And I also listed Easy CBM Lite as a great resource if you're looking for passages, if you're looking for 1-minute passages to impact your work within the reading comprehension, the reading fluency. There's certainly many there. But Easy CBM Lite is a great resource for teachers. It's free. I see Dr. Bates has turned her screen on there for a second. Did you have something to say? No.
I was just going to jump in and just say what you're talking about right now, just to reiterate that when we're thinking about the skill that we're writing that goal around, we have to think about what some of how we're going to get them there, or the sub components of that skill. But it's important for them to know, if it's working on fluency, is it the problem that they're having with decoding words, right? So it's really about knowing the student so well when we write a goal that we know exactly what the deficit is. So that's sometimes why it's hard to answer that question, I think, is because children are so different, our students are so different, that some things work for other students. So I think the biggest takeaway of what you're talking about right here, Mr. May, is understanding what the skill deficit is, and then how do we match those activities, and how do we plan for them to move. For example, if we're working on accuracy or rate or expression, those may be things that we're working on to help a student be more fluent, right? So we may give them opportunity. If it's accuracy or if it's their rate, we may give them an opportunity to read familiar text, right? It could be that they're stuck on sounding out words, or they need some word attack skills. So we're working on word attack. So I just think that's an important thing to think about. And that's a lot, and it's pretty in depth, but that's what we really want to know is, where is it is it a basic reading skills deficit? Is it that they're having trouble? Is it the high frequency words? Can we give them high frequency words and phrases and allow them to practice and practice and practice until they become more fluent with that? So I just wanted to interject there, just to kind of give people an idea about what some of the things that we could do. And like you said, also, if ultimately we want students to be able to comprehend text. And so we have to look at the skills that they need, and that helps us write the goal. And I noticed the goal that you have on the screen, it is kind of mismatched. We're talking about
It is mismatched.
we're talking about reading word passages, but then we're looking at reading accuracy. So we have to look to see, are we just reading terms? Is it in fluency? Are we really looking for other skills? Is it a phonics or a phonemic awareness, or is it
and from a compliance standpoint, Dr. Bates, we see lots of times we're applying the same goals. If we have 15 kids, we may be incorrectly applying the same goals to all 15 kids. So we got to really pinpoint and be diagnosticians and diagnose where the student, where that entry level is and where they currently are functioning, so that we can work on those skills. Because in reading, and I'm not a reading specialist by any stretch of the imagination, but when you're talking about reading, you can't skip steps. If a kid has a deficit in phonics, phonemic awareness, or vocabulary or fluency, we've got to go back and work on that in its subcomponent part. And it will then impact that overall level of reading comprehension that you're seeking once those students start to get into the 3rd grade and the 4th grade, where they're being assessed at the state level. That reading comprehension becomes more and more important. And so I wanted to throw a bad goal out there just to show you that it's possible to have all the components, but then the goal not be measurable, or it be vague, or you be measuring a couple of different things within the same goal. And so hopefully it wasn't too confusing, but certainly it was something I thought that needed to be pointed out, because we see so many times where goals are mismatched, or we haven't pinpointed exactly what the problem is and determine what that baseline is and what that instructional level is for that student. And so, just a huge piece of it, I think, as we consider this particular skill. Stephanie, I see you got your screen on. You have something? to
Well,
interject.
I had put in that, using our standards, and in mathematics, we have that coherence model to where we can go back. And so if that child's had, um, the opportunity to have MAP or STAR or any of those, which is going to be in your present level, of course,
Mhm.
but along with, I try to do something like either the forefront screeners or those kind of things, because in MAP and STAR, we don't sit down with them side by side and talk to them. And many times when I'm talking to a student and I'm doing like the forefront screeners or those kind of things, I can understand the student's thinking because it's very much verbal.
Mhm.
And at that point, I can start diagnosing a little better on where are they having problems. Is it
Yeah.
relying back on place value? Because in mathematics, that could be the issue. And so think about those kind of things that we may need to look at, even though it's not something that we typically would write goals for. We think that we usually try to head in on those big areas, but sometimes it's the smaller areas that we need to. You talked about having those, um basically those sub goals, right? That's underneath.
Yes.
We need to think about how those affect our students
Yeah,
every
and
day.
how they build on that overall, because that annual goal is a year. And so sometimes
Mhm.
we fall a little short and we were a little shallow on planning for a whole year. And so we got to think, okay, what are the subcomponents of this goal that are going to help that student improve in that particular area? And reading comprehension is just a good example of that, in terms of, you may need to go back and look at vocabulary or phonemic awareness or phonics instruction. And fluency, of course, is a big determining factor. But let's go ahead and move on past that. I was just going to show you really quickly some examples here. Curriculum-based probes are, oral reading fluency probes, math computation probes, and math reasoning probes. When you select that from the drop down, you need to make sure that you're matching the appropriate probing up with what you're calling curriculum-based measures. May not in fact be curriculum-based measure. So you need to make sure. And then within Infinite Campus, the direct measures, the frequency count, the duration recording, latency recording, those are all basically behavioral things in nature. Okay. How many times is a student doing a particular behavior? How long is that behavior lasting? Or how long does it take that student to get started? So we need to be able to convert those things into percentages always, so that we can put them in Infinite Campus goal monitoring. We're still going to have raw data. We're still going to have numbers that we can measure. And then even when you're looking at authentic measures, this is student interview, oral interview, student work samples. You always have to pair that with another measure to make it quantifiable. And so when we're thinking about that, it's just important. And then, of course, those indirect measures can include things like permanent products, checklists, and teacher-made tests. Certainly, and as you see down here, this is a screen grab from the IEP guidance document. You can see how they define what a checklist is and how it goes into determining what the appropriate evaluation method of measurement is. Permanent products are like homework. Indirect measures are going to be measures that you're going to take when you're not with that student. You're going to grade something. You're going to take a grade on a teacher-made test, or you're going to let them have a checklist, and then you're going to grade how well they do a particular task on with the use of that checklist. So, if we're using a checklist to determine how well they produce a permanent product, is a good example, or a work sample, or so that those are super important. And then I really want to get this particular screen right here just shows you, and I really like this one when we're talking about measuring and putting the information into Infinite Campus goal monitoring. It tells you about duration, event recording, latency, curriculum-based measures, and direct measures, indirect measures. And so it breaks it down for you in a nice, neat chart there, that you can understand that durations, how long behavior lasts, and we're going to turn that into average minutes or average seconds or a percent. Event recording, the number of times something occurred. We're going to look at frequency data around that, and we're going to turn that eventually into a rate or percent, something that we can measure, and so on and so forth. Now, here I want to talk about a little bit about the internal consistency of the IEP. And this goal in particular, given a word reading list on the 4th grade instructional level, that would be your circumstance. Johnny is your audience. He's going to read multisyllabic words with 70% accuracy on 3 out of 4 consecutive trials as measured by a weekly checklist. And then we're going to turn that into possibly an event recording where we're going to turn that into a percentage. We're going to look at that checklist. We're going to see how many multisyllabic words he's getting, and we're going to input that raw data. But I want to also talk about, can we see over here where we're talking about reading multisyllabic words has a baseline performance of 46%. Now this student is MMD, and so his rate of improvement may not be as fast for a whole year as some students that may be OHI or LD who have higher IQ scores. So, you got to think about making sure that if you're saying you got a 70%, you're going to work on multisyllabic words, and over here in your present level, you've included that baseline data there. And then the other piece is I was going to have you then try your hand at writing a goal. Okay, so here's an example of a student profile. We got Maria to grade 5. She struggles with multi-step math problems, achieving 60% accuracy with visual supports. And she is improving problem-solving skills, is her goal focus. So once you take a shot at writing a goal, just write a goal for this using the ABCDEF format. So there's your little bit of a task for you. So we're looking at Maria. She's in grade 5. She struggles with multi-step problems. She's achieving only 60% accuracy with visual support, without visual supports, and we're looking at improving her problem-solving skills. Take a turn at trying to write a goal here with the proper method. We'll go ahead and just give you the answer here that we come up with. Stephanie, did you have one? So
Well,
here's
I
what
was
came
going to
up with.
start it out with when given multi-step math problems, the student, yeah,
on a particular level, would you say?
yes,
Yeah,
I would. Well, if this child's on a 5th grade, typically on a 5th grade level, and they may be working on a 3rd grade level, I would move back to a 4th grade level.
yes. 4th grade
and do
instructional
that.
level.
Yes.
Yeah. So given multi-step math problems on the 4th grade instructional level, she will solve. We may provide her with a graphic organizer or some type of visual support.
I was thinking a worked example. Using a worked example.
A work example. Okay. And then we're going to try to get her up to about 90% accuracy at that level, because that's the independent level we would work toward. And then we would go with about possibly maybe 3 out of 4 trials, 4 out of 5 trials consecutively. And we would we could also say we're going to take data on that weekly, maybe more, or maybe 2 times a month. We would, we do a lot of instruction. We would do, and then if you were thinking about short-term objectives, Steph, the standards inside out and upside down. How would you break that down? What might be a short-term discrete skill that would aid her with those word problems?
Well, I was just thinking how you could break that down would be if it had 2 steps with addition, or then
Okay.
if you had an addition with subtraction, and then maybe addition with multiplication, because those would be good ways to do that.
And so you would make those your short-term objectives. That's going to support that overall annual goal. And what operation is the operation that's involved would be solving multi-step problems.
Or Clifford, if you're talking about operations as in if it's addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division, I'm not for sure, but that could, okay. So if it's that, then I would want to have that on some kind of a checklist. That way I know if I need to go back and maybe work on multiplication. Does she need maybe a different kind of graphic organizer to where she's doing some of those? So, and that can be part of her SDI.
Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. So you're looking for those strategies that are going to improve that, and you're going to provide that because that SDI is going to be intentional to that goal, right? And it's going to be what you're going to provide the student with to develop that goal.
And as she's working in the classroom, what I was thinking of was, if I'm using a graphic organizer that I'm working with her, maybe in the resource room, maybe she's coming to me for a few minutes just to get certain skills. And if I'm using that, I want to make sure she can use that same graphic organizer in her regular math class.
So it
I want it,
transfers.
yes. And even on the state
Correct.
testing, that she'll be ready to go with it. It's going to be open, right? It's going to be like an open hundreds chart that where she
Yeah.
could literally go in there and make the arrays if she needs to, or it could be like a thinking map. And if you haven't
Yes.
looked up thinking maps, those are great. And the student actually draws those out. They get very familiar with those. And I think things like that is what we need.
Yeah, and your special design instruction is something you're going to teach that student how to create that on their own graphic organizer for themselves, and how that links to the problems. And that practice is what we're talking about with that short-term objective. It may be just instruction on how to use that, and so that's certainly a piece of it as well. And so that's some really good discussion. I really appreciate Clifford putting his out there for everybody to see. And Clifford, you did a really good job, and Dr. Bates did a good job in creating those goals around that. Clifford said when provided a math sheet containing at least 10 multi-step math problems at the 5th grade level, and Stephanie thought maybe 4th grade level because she's in the 5th grade. She's probably going to have a deficit there. So and then there's we didn't give you all that information. That would be in the present level. We'd have to determine what is her current level of functioning, and what is her zone of proximal development that's going to push her into that productive struggle where she's going to actually be learning, but you're going to scaffold that learning with graphic organizers and specially designed instruction that you're providing. And so, man, great discussion here. And then just let me get down here to Dr. Bates. I will say, Clifford, you have all the components, and it is measurable. You did a great job with that. And when presented with multi-step math problems on the 3rd grade level, Maria will solve problems with 80% accuracy on 4 out of 5 trials as measured by weekly probes. So Dr. Bates was even thinking, she may be on 2nd grade level, and we're pushing her to that because as part of the Andrew F piece, we're always looking to provide and push students into that productive struggle zone where we're providing them with scaffolding, and we're providing them with the tools, and then gradually pull that away so that we can release them to independence. And so that whole teaching and learning piece there is what we should be doing, especially teachers. Now let's do one more little exercise here
Denny, Paul,
as we close out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
We're talking about math, and I know he's kind of getting bogged down with this, and I put some stuff in the chat, but one of the things that I try to do anytime I'm teaching math, and this includes for the grade level content that they're working on, is to use numbers that they understand or numbers they can manipulate. So I try to do numbers less than 50, or if I can use a 100 chart and do the math in some way, or a 10 frame, then I stay within 100. But most of the time I try to stay within numbers of 20. And even for my kids, like when I was teaching algebra, I stayed within numbers of 20 all the time so that we could physically move those objects around. So
Yes.
finding a way for them to use those manipulatives, because in mathematics, there are so many manipulatives out there that they can walk through. It is important for that part of it. So I really push CSA for everybody. And in math, we know that kids have to touch it. They have to touch it. They have to move it. And so that's important.
Absolutely.
So, and you can observe, that's the other thing. You can observe them using those manipulatives and be able to do that. So I would highly recommend finding the manipulatives that work best for your kids.
Let's take one more stab at this real quick, and let's see if we can take this math goal. See, Stephanie, I didn't leave you out. I talked a lot about reading up front, but we got a lot of math here on the end. And thank you so much for your comments and your participation, because it's made it really good. And Dr. Bates, I appreciate you as well as everyone online that's participating. So just take a look at this one really quickly, and let's see if we can put this in the chat. Okay. What's the audience? Obviously. And I've got it a little bit color coded here for you. So that's another little scaffold that you can use with your own students, right? And so that's the types of things we're talking about. So let's just do it. Let's do it out loud so we don't run out of time. We're just about ready to hit the 4:30 mark here. So Karen is going to be your audience. Your behavior is going to be, will correctly solve subtraction problems. Your circumstance when presented with 10 one-digit distraction problems. Subtraction problems, either orally or written, that's going to be your circumstance. And then with 80% accuracy on 4 consecutive trials is going to be your degree criterion, and math probes is going to be your method of measurement, and we're going to do it weekly. So, I think, you know, is 80% a bit of a high expectation? 80% can be a bit of a high expectation, and you have to consider the student's disabling condition, and you have to their potential for learning. You have to look at IQ scores, and you have to look at previous progress monitoring to tell you how much of a rate of improvement that student is expected to make. 90% is the independent level for that grade. If you're talking about reading, or you're talking about mathematics, 90% is that independent level that we shoot for. I like to shoot for 90%, but sometimes that's not attainable in a year. So it's certainly okay to put 70 in there or 60% and work on that. But make sure that we're doing not only annual goals that are broad enough, but short-term objectives that break that overall goal down and make a difference with those kids, because we have to find time with our own teaching to not only provide access to the curriculum for the grade that they're in, but we have to find time to work on those skills, or they're never going to improve and move to that next level. Listen, it's been a great session. We appreciate you all so much. We've run out of time. Thank you guys out there around the region that have chosen to spend some time with us. We hope it's been helpful. I appreciate everybody's input, and I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Bates. She looks like she's about to bubble. Nope.
Nope, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. May. And I think it was a great session. Thanks to each of you for being part of this conversation. I think it was a fantastic conversation today. So I hope each of you took away some new learning. So thank you for being with us. We'll close out. Thanks, Mr. May.
Thank you.